Moderator will then kick off the conversation, asking questions that draw out some of the high-level themes and trends we should be thinking about. You have access to the session chat, and we encourage you to use it. Engage, ask questions, and don't forget to learn more about us at crosscut.com. Okay, now let's get started.
Hi, welcome. I am Rebecca Cooney, a scholarly associate professor of strategic communication here at Murrow College, and I am your moderator today. In addition to teaching, I am the director of Murrow Online Programs and a research associate for an NIH-funded grant. Outside of WSU, I am a consultant in learning experience design and effective communication in the virtual space, and it is a true honor to moderate this panel, Entrepreneurship, Steer Your Startup for Success. I'm going to begin today's session by introducing each of the panelists, We will continue with a series of questions I will pose to the panelists. Please feel free to post questions or comments in the chat, and I will also leave about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. So here we go, let's get started. I'm going to introduce Cheri Brennan. She is the founder of Alliance Communications, a marketing and public relations consulting firm in Bellevue. She founded that in 1990. Upon graduation from WSU, she accepted an offer from an advertising agency in San Francisco and subsequently worked in retail advertising before returning to Seattle. And then her experience includes PR, marketing positions in various organizations, including the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, a newspaper, a multi-office real estate brokerage, and the Washington State Bar Association. She earned an MBA from Seattle University and has served as president of 3 professional associations. Welcome, Cheri. Next, I have Paul Casey. He is a radio host, a self-employment specialist, and CEO of Casey Communications, a full-service marketing and communications firm that's based in Seattle. Paul has written 2 books on self-employment and featuring 8 myths he's going to talk about more today. And prior to founding Casey Communications, Paul worked in state government as a community affairs director, account executive for a mid-sized PR firm, and a public affairs manager that led to the successful completion of the downtown Seattle tunnel project. Jamerika is next. She is a native of Tacoma, Washington, and she has more than 10 years of experience as a journalist and advocate for children in foster care. While growing up in foster care, Jamerika was determined to have a different life than the one she experienced. She put herself through college, earning a BA in communication from WSU. Her previous employers include the YMCA of Greater Seattle and the Press Enterprise in Riverside, California. She is currently the event communications specialist for Plymouth Housing in Seattle. And as the owner of Cleverjam Communications, she offers strategic communications guidance, motivational speaking, and facilitation. She is Miss Evergreen State 2020 through the USA Ambassador Pageant. Her platform is A Chance to Succeed, Empowering Youth in Foster Care. We've got 2 more. Jennifer is the owner of Jennifer Korfiatis, I'm gonna say it right, marketing, featuring services in communication, marketing, and PR strategy. With more than 20 years in the field of professional communications, she has owned 4 businesses and has worked with dozens of entrepreneurs to launch and grow their ventures. Jennifer serves as a business professor at Wenatchee Valley College, where she teaches business, entrepreneurship, and marketing classes, and as an adjunct professor at Central Washington University, where she teaches entrepreneurship. She begins her doctoral program at USC this May. And then lastly, we have Rebecca Zanatta, who has more than 20 years experience raising funds, recruiting and training volunteers, developing programs to fit constituents' needs, and fostering environments to promote awareness and loyalty among target audiences with 100+ clients in her 10-year consulting career. She graduated from WSU with a BA in organizational communication and holds an MED in higher education administration from the University of Idaho. She is a past president of Northwest Development Offices Association and serves as an adjunct faculty member at Seattle University in the Master of Nonprofit Leadership program. She serves on the WSU Foundation and Alpha Phi Foundation Board of Trustees, and is a sustaining member of the Junior League of Seattle. So much accomplishment in that group. So I'm going to kick things off right away and ask the panelists a series of questions and allow each of them to answer in turn. So panelists, here we go. First question is, how did you get started as an entrepreneur? And Cheri is going to kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's an honor to be part of this panel. And I do have to say, I really miss the interaction with the students at Symposium. It's always one of my favorite parts. So next year, I look forward to being able to meet and greet students face to face. So I got started after I ended up parlaying my experience largely in associations. And you saw from my bio that I worked for a couple of associations. And to this day, I still count associations as my clients. So they are, I don't want to pigeonhole myself or be too much of a one client kind of consultant, because I do work with other businesses, small businesses, startups. I've worked in the pet space, the wine industry, the golf industry, but it was really associations that probably gave me the foundation for launching my business. And I did leave an association to become a consultant. So that was probably my grounding, and to this day stays is an important part. And I love serving associations because it's a constant changing cast of characters as their volunteer boards come and go. You get to experience events, a lot of writing, advocacy. It's a really nice variety that suits me.
That's wonderful, Cheri. Thank you so much. Paul, same question. How did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Well, actually, it was really the last thing on my mind I wanted to do after graduating from WSU. I went to work for state government, as you mentioned, then some local government, and then went to a boutique PR firm. Then I worked again for a local government, the Metro Transit Agency. And I just hit a point where I'm going, oh, excuse me. And in between that, I was director of a local nonprofit. So I kind of covered some bases. And it just was something that I was not saying, what is next? And then it really occurred to me going, what is next? I think the only other thing would be like becoming and running your own business. So I say that because I talked to a lot of people who will say that they knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur when they were 5 years old or 10 years old. They had this burning desire, where it was my last choice. I was running out of options, and I was thinking, if I don't want to live on a park bench, I got to give this a shot too, to find my real goal in life. And so it was something I picked up then, and I said, I'm going to give it a couple of years. And that's what I did, and went in entirely different directions with it. But that was in 1988, and it's what I'm doing now. And I really enjoyed it. But again, I kind of fell into it, I think, more than I say that burning desire.
Jamerika.
Thank you, Rebecca. When I was in college, I always knew that I wanted to have like my own business, and I wanted it to be based in communications. And it had started off with the idea of like media consulting, image consulting. But when I started doing pageantry at the start of my college career, I had the opportunity to volunteer and give back to my community by helping other youth in foster care. And so between those two, I felt like, well, I can do motivational speaking, because at that point I had just spoken at like, lunches or just other smaller community events. And I knew with having a background in communications, especially from WSU, that would be a great fit. So I got into the working world through nonprofit, namely when I was at the YMCA of Greater Seattle, working with youth in foster care or who were experiencing homelessness. And I thought to myself, now I kind of have like this social service background along with comms. It's time to launch the consulting business. And it's definitely been a whirlwind. I've had the opportunity to speak at all sorts of different events, sharing my story. And I know that having a degree from WSU really has allowed me to not only become the entrepreneur I've always wanted to, but as well as a professional?
My path to entrepreneurship is perhaps a little bit different. I'm a WSU alum, class of 95, Murrow School of Communication, and always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur somewhere in the realm of marketing or strategic communications, which is what I studied when I was at WSU. So upon graduation, I'm a Seattle native, and I went to work for a boutique advertising firm in downtown Seattle, really with the intention of learning as much as I could. When I was on campus at WSU at that time, there wasn't a directed area of study around entrepreneurship. So I didn't have the opportunity to learn the academic side. So I put myself through the school of hard knocks, and through my work at this advertising agency, they were wonderful with mentoring me, and I really learned the ropes. However, I'm a Seattle native, but I was not loving life in downtown Seattle. I'm far more interested in outdoor recreation and Four Seasons and all of that. And so after my time there, I moved to Wenatchee and found a job at the Washington Apple Commission and their communications department. And so I was able to learn the business side of it through the lens of an association, a little bit like Cheri. And from there, I went to work for a major radio station. And in my work with different businesses through that position, business owners started asking me to, instead of, can you handle my advertising on your station? It became, can you just handle my advertising? And so that was a pretty strong indicator for me that the time was becoming right. And so because I had bills to pay, I kept my day job, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And I came home every day of the week, and I worked on my business plan, and I built the model. And, frankly, it was exhausting. It took me a while, but I wanted to launch my first business in a sustainable way. And so when the time was right, I was able to make that transition pretty seamlessly.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, I'm Rebecca Zanatta, class of 1997. And my career is interesting. I've spent my career in nonprofit management. So I am a for-profit as a business owner, but my community is the nonprofit sector. So my first job in fundraising was calling alumni and parents at Call a Coug at WSU. And that's when I realized you could actually have a career in this profession. And so I worked through with Alpha Phi, which is my sorority. I lived in Chicago for several years. Then I came back and worked for WSU out of the Seattle office. And at some point along that path, realized I really wanted to work for myself. I wanted the flexibility. I wanted choice in kind of who I worked with, when I worked, et cetera. And so for me, there was always sort of a question, do I have enough experience? Am I old enough? And finally kind of got to that point where I had was doing some work with the Pacific Science Center and their $50 million campaign, and realized it was time to start my own business. So I started my own business and about 11 years ago, and then also helped build the Ostara Group, which is a local fundraising consulting firm in the Seattle area as well. And so I've been part of a larger entrepreneurship experience. And then I, as myself, I am my own entity. So kind of came down to leadership for me, really looking around and saying, you know what, I think I can do this and I want to do this. And so did that and have been happy I made that leap. And as Jennifer said, you have to pay the bills, and there's some strategy along the way, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But for me, I really have enjoyed it. And again, really excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much. I think those are terrific origin stories. And one key point that I'm hearing from the group is that you ease into it. It's not something that you necessarily go right into right away. That there's a time that you keep your day job and you're doing the entrepreneurial work on the side, and gaining that experience and continuing to preserve your base and also pursue your independent and entrepreneurial endeavor. So thank you for sharing. We're going to move on to question 2. What are your top 2 to 3 lessons learned as an entrepreneur? And we will start with Cheri.
Thank you, Ian. I think probably the hardest lesson I learned at the get-go was I thought I could be all things to all people. And it took me a while to learn that I could go to other resources for support. And I actually formed my company name around the idea of working as teams. So even though I'm a solo entrepreneur, I do have a network of other resources that I can go to complement what services I can provide. So I can function as a virtual agency before virtual became in vogue. So that was one. The other one was even before I decided to start my own business was I'm a believer in lifelong education. And I went back to school 10 years after graduating from Murrow to get the business foundation, because as much as I loved the curriculum at Murrow, it was liberal arts and I did not have much of a business background. So I did enroll in CLU. They had an evening program so I could work full time and be a student at night. So I did get my MBA with a marketing emphasis, and that has proved to serve me pretty well.
Well, I can jump in a little bit here, and that's a very challenging question, more challenging than I thought it would be. But as I reflect back, I think that the types of businesses I mentioned, the things that I did before, like state government, local government, nonprofit, leading up to what I recognize now, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because when I had all those other experiences, when I would struggle, and we all do as entrepreneurs, and sometimes we'll go, is this really worth it? And you ask yourself that question along the way. But then it comes back to when you have other experiences, then you say, now I know what I'm doing. And I really think it's extremely important to have about 4 or 5 reasons as to why you want to become an entrepreneur beyond making money. I mean, it's a lifestyle decision. There's a lot of different things that you play into this, and you have to have those. It's almost like your constitution up on the wall. I know why I'm doing this now. And one of my reasons, again, as I go along into it, I wanted to be the master of my own fate and wanted to control my own time. So that was really big to me, almost more important than what I was going to do. The other thing I learned kind of as an entrepreneur is that when I first started out, I was publishing newspapers and I turned into radio and then became a media buyer, is that, you know, really being an entrepreneur in and of itself is a profession. I mean, my name's Paul Casey. I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I do, as opposed to another walk of life. This is what I'm doing now. So that was something, you know, the mindset of an entrepreneur that you really find out about yourself as you go through it. The other thing I'd say, the third thing I learned is a big one, is the customer is not always right. And a bad customer, depending on where you have. You can be, if you're running a retail operation, you can have 100 people walk in the store or something like that every day, and you lose a customer, it's not a big deal. But when you're in the professional business, you maybe have 6 customers really, or 6 clients, you lose a couple of those and you're out of business. And you have to really be careful and have a good gut on you when you want to engage with other people, because usually you get paid, you don't get paid up front. And you have to really investigate the people and get that kind of sixth sense about the trust in people and who you engage with, and really learn the discipline of saying no. And that's hard to do.
Thank you, Paul. I would say the first lesson is that you have to have a business plan. I don't think I could have got anything started. And Jennifer is totally right. I spent at least 6 months working on my business plan, and that lays down the foundation from the type of market you'll be working in as a professional to your financials. And another thing from having a business plan is that you need to track your financials and stay on top of that. That is what differentiates having a business from a hobby. I would say the second thing is really having good customer service skills, and not just in relation to your clients, but with other vendors and people who may be working on projects with you. You know, it is what it is. Conflicts are going to come up, And Paul is totally right about making sure that you get to know the people that you'll be working with, because I've been in experiences where people have dropped the ball and you try to follow up and they disappear. And so that means you'll also have to have a contingency plan on what happens when things fall through. And there's been a few times where that's happened to me, and I've learned my lesson by making sure that I interview people, I get a good feeling about them. And if something doesn't work out, I have 2 other people I can call to help me out.
Yeah, absolutely. My lessons learned, number one is trust my gut. My gut has never been wrong. And there have been instances where I have a client or a vendor or, whatever, a subcontractor for money or prestige or whatever it might be, but my gut has told me that it's a bad idea, and it's always been a bad idea. So trust your gut. It won't lead you astray. Number two is have fun, because the reality is the other option available to you is getting a job, working for somebody, and there's lots of great benefits to doing that. However, being an entrepreneur and running your own shop has some inherent real advantages. And if you don't enjoy them, you're missing a big part of the point, I think. The next one is challenging, I find, and that is surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And I say that it's challenging because I believe that at the root of entrepreneurship, there's a tiny little kernel of ego, because we're all assuming that we can do something that people will value and pay money for, and that perhaps we can do it better than other people. And so that really is wrapped in ego, and it can be challenging to admit that you might not know it all. And that's a very, very important realization. And taking the step to actually realize that others might have expertise that you need and you can leverage requires you to sort of admit to yourself that you might not be the smartest person in the room on that particular topic. And that can be really challenging. The last sort of lesson learned is sort of to what Paul was saying, and that is watch your pipeline. So in a professional service business, you have a limited number of clients typically, unlike a more traditional retail outlet. And I'm very aware of where my client load is in my pipeline. And to Paul's point, what I don't want to do is have half of them either end their contract with me through a natural attrition or leave or whatever and be caught, empty-handed. So I'm always very aware of where my clients are in my pipeline and who I need to replace and what I need to bring on in a way that makes the work that I do sustainable.
Really good lessons. I'm learning a lot. To your point, Jennifer, right? You don't know it all. So I was really literal. And so similar to Jennifer, hire professionals, right? People that are smarter than you. So hire an accountant, an attorney, a bookkeeper. You don't want to make all that money per se, and then get that first tax bill and say, oh gosh, I didn't save for my taxes, right? So hiring some professionals, really important. For me, keeping your personal and professional expenses separated. So I was really literal and had I have a business expense, and I have, like Jamerika said, right? You got to stay on top of that. And so for me, I had my personal accounts, and then I opened my business accounts and business credit card. So you can start networking and marketing and advertising and keep those things separated. And then the third thing would be to utilize your network to secure an anchor client, right? So many of us worked in jobs, and then the ability to start your own business, to that point of just jumping off that cliff into entrepreneurship, sometimes it helps to have an anchor client, right? And so I was lucky in that I did. I signed a contract for a year that helped me sort of launch my business. And so there's this opportunity to go back to past people you've worked with, to bring them into your client base, but to really, again, similar to what Jennifer said, manage that pipeline. But if you can, have an anchor client to help you launch your business.
That's terrific. I wrote down a few takeaways on that. Have a business plan, hire professionals on your team that are smarter than you and can help. Trust your gut, utilize your network, and have fun. That's awesome. Thank you. Third question is, what are some myths about self-employment? Starting with Cheri.
I think two of them that probably all of us experience is people think it's a get-rich-quick scheme. It takes a lot of hard work to either get that first client, to sustain them, and then to build from there. The other thing is time management. I obviously have some flexibility in scheduling, but the flip side is I'm also kind of on call all the time. And vacations sometimes revolve around my recurring deadlines that I know. Unfortunately, I'm married to a pretty patient man who can adjust around my schedule and my commitments. But I think those are the two myths that I still, to this day, even after years as a consultant, wrestle with is the time issue of how to balance the work-life balance and the monetary side of managing the finances, whether it's planning for the taxes or unexpected expenses if your computer system crashes, or in my case, I had to replace my phone the week we were leaving, and you know, there's that. And unless you have a lot of support systems around you, it's on you.
I would say that some that I've developed over the years, and as I progressed in my business, I kind of mentally made a note of what I thought it was like going into it, and then the reality. And one of the biggest myths is that I believe over a period of time is that people would believe like I'm a big risk taker. And I don't believe that. I believe that some are. You read about the ones in Entrepreneur magazine that starts a business on a credit card. That's not advisable. And the reason you read about it is because it's so unusual that you make it when you do that. So one of the things that I felt that after I did some career moves and things, and why I say writing down 5 or 6 reasons why you want to take this step, is that it is something that you want to really sustain yourself over a long period of time, that it's not a get rich quick opportunity that was mentioned before, but that you're really, let's say, patient. You don't want to jump and make leaps and bounds. You want to be steady. And most people that are standing at the end of the day are that way. They know this is a long process. It's not going to be rich in 2 years. And it's not desirable to be that way in 2 years, but this is a 10-year or lifetime commitment. So all I'm saying is that I find the people who really are standing up at the end of the day are ones that are not risk takers. They view it as I think I did. The real risk is working for someone else and letting someone else decide your fate. So that's number one. And Chris, quickly, and another one, that we're living in a positive world, think positive and everything's going to work out. I have a little big different take on that. I say get up every day and think worst case scenario. What could go wrong? And it's not that you want to go to a client and be that way. You have to show you're very positive and believe in what you're doing, and you do. But really, I mean, I just think about a restaurant who opened up to a grand opening, and I don't know what that is, but on March 1st, 2020, they expected everything to be just fine. They had their marketing plan, they had everything ready to go, and look what happens. Now that's an extreme experience, but still, I always think you want to think, you know, go down the road and think of these possibilities of things that can get in the way. And I think that's really important.
Thanks, Cheri and Paul. I'll echo it again. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's lots of years of hard work. I think I was telling them 5 years in, I was finally able to pay myself after paying Uncle Sam, having enough left over for expenses and savings. It took me 5 years to get to that point. So you definitely, like Paul said, you need to have 5 to 6 good reasons why you're doing this. A myth that I think people have is that you're your own boss and you don't have to answer to anyone. No, that is completely wrong. The client is the boss. And I've had other people who are entrepreneurs and I was a client to them, and just the amount of arrogance and disdain they had towards customers and their customers' intelligence around their purchasing power and options. And it was disgusting. And it was just like, that's not how it works. You know, we all have to answer to someone, even if you're an entrepreneur. I would say the second myth is just because you build it doesn't mean they're going to come, right? And so one thing that you have to do is allow people to get to know you. And that's by making sure you have a good reputation, you follow through on what you say you're gonna do, allowing people to get to know you. One reason why I got involved in motivational speaking is I didn't see a lot of women on the speaking circuit. And it was just like, well, why not? And so I felt like I was meeting a need, not realizing there was all these other layers involved, budgets, people wanting an established speaker. And I really had to prove to people and go, no, I haven't stood yet on a stage as a keynote speaker, but I have the skill set. And people took trust on me, and I did a really good job, and I kept getting more gigs. So you really have to stay the course.
That's brilliant. So when I teach entrepreneurship classes, students land in my classes often with a very sort of romanticized idea of what this is. And right out of the gate, and I don't know if this is terrible or not, but I say, I'm just going to put that to bed right now. You will never work harder as an entrepreneur. If you want the easier path professionally, get a job with somebody where you can clock in and clock out and you have the perception of a steady paycheck. As Paul mentioned, it might not actually be the case, but the perception is that there's some security there. Being an entrepreneur is incredibly hard and it is exhausting. One of the primary myths for me that I really wrestled with was one of my primary drivers for wanting to be an entrepreneur very, very early on was I wanted the lifestyle, and I wanted to, you know, it's sunny out, I'm going to go do something else and check out of work, and I don't have to tell anybody that. When I think it was Jamerika mentioned, that's absolutely not the case. I have never worked more hours than I have in my own business. You know, a fair bit of my work is around crisis communications, and my clients pay to have access to me when they need access to me. And sometimes that call comes in at a really inconvenient time, but I don't have a choice because that's the deal we made. In my professional career, I've taken one non-working vacation, and that was my honeymoon. Other than that, my laptop and my phone are with me, and I'm checking in every day. And so my myth of I want this lifestyle of controlling my own schedule was really blown out of the water when I realized I've never had less control over my own schedule.
Interesting. Yeah, you know, listening to everybody kind of being in this spot of going in this order, you know, for me, I didn't have the appearance of being get rich quick, but I will say a myth is you can actually make a living as an entrepreneur, self-employed. And so what's really funny is sometimes I will be in situations still 10 years later, and people will say, so when are you going to get a real job? Right? Because they don't think that apparently owning your own business is a real job. So, you know, to me, I think I agree with the freedom piece. I mean, you get freedom, but you also lose some of your freedom, right? Because you are working, you are on call. And so to me, I think it's really important to really think about those whys. And also the myth that you can do what you want to do and work with who you want to work with, because there's sometimes just an opportunity that you got to pay the bills, right? And so you're taking a client that, you know, you wish you could sort of have a hard line. But the myth of this idea that you sometimes just need to do what you need to do so that you can keep that pipeline full. So I agree with everything everybody said and just would add those couple of things.
Another great round. Thank you. Some key takeaways I pulled from that one. Self-employment is not a get-rich-quick endeavor. Finding work-life balance is challenging and important. You want to be steady. It is a long process, so patience is essential. And follow through on what you say you're going to do. Good advice. So we do have a question in the chat that I'm going to pop in here. and encourage others to also start asking questions when you're ready. Brady asks, how long did it take to start up a business and realize that it would be a success? Go ahead, Cheri.
That's a great question, Brady. I think from a student perspective, it would be really challenging to the day after graduating to start your own business. I was 20 years probably into my career before I made that decision. And it was a very deliberate decision. I'm very self-disciplined, so I had that confidence with me. But and I did, as Rebecca, I think in her opening comments, made the remark that you kind of moonlight maybe to get started. And I did have a project before I ended my employment, before I became independent. And that sustained me for the first couple of months. And of course, I had some savings that could fill in there. I would say it was 6 to 12 months before I was really confident I could be totally self-sufficient. I was fortunate in being the fallback choice for a client that is still a client, and that goes back many, many years. That was my first retainer client. And those, for any entrepreneur, are the best to have that recurring monthly income, but also knowing they know that you are available as well. So retainers are one good fee structure. But so six to 12 months was my experience, and it's worked. So.
Well, I'm a slow learner then, because it took me a lot longer to get to that point where I feel that I got comfortable with the certain things I was trying. I was zigzagging some, but I always stayed in the communications business. I wasn't like opening up a restaurant across the street and a dry cleaner in service. I think that's a mistake. You have to have focus. You want to be flexible, but there's that fine line of getting into too many things. And I find the pretenders later on, they're always having some little thing on the side going, and they collapse in the middle. So I just feel success is never final. I mean, it's an ongoing process. I mean, there's not this point that I think when the beginning I said, okay, where is that going to be that point? And I'm on the hill going, I made it. Yeah. I still think every day you have to get up and perform. So it's something that you have to be vigilant on. However, I do think that the longer you're in business, the longevity, I think everybody's been kind of saying that, the longer you're in business, good things start to happen. If you are authentic, keep your commitments, your word, and everything else out there, all of a sudden you'll start to get the calls more coming towards you maybe. And then clients that you don't expect. And that's the fun part. That's when you go, okay, this has been worth it. But it took me, I think, to call maybe 10 or 11 years before I got to the point where I picked up a phone, and it changed my trajectory in my business, and it was a big boost to what I did. I don't know the other experiences, but again, I think my whole advice would be, you got to be vigilant all the time. You never really make it.
All right,
Jamerika.
awesome. Yeah, I was just unmuting myself. For me, like I mentioned, in college, I wanted to start up my own, public speaking business. But my thing was making sure that I had enough experience in the work environment in a traditional sense. And so I told myself at least a couple of years. I've been working since I was about 14 years old, and knew that I needed at least 2 to 5 years, like either working in journalism or in the workplace with nonprofit before I could launch my own business. And what I did is I went through the Small Business Administration office through WSU. And I said, look here, just be honest with me. Do you think this is valuable? And do you think it's going to be valued by other people where they're going to want to pay me? And the advisor said, yes, of course. And so that's when I started writing my business plan. And along with that, also to website, branding, marketing formation, and getting that spearheaded. And I realized it was a success when people were giving me compliments. They were wanting to work with me. Hey, can you come speak at our event? And that meant a lot to me, especially working with kids and teenagers. Whenever I would do workshops with them, because they can be pretty honest. And, when I got good feedback from them, that's when I realized, like, wow, this is really sticking. And like that hard work really does pay off.
I built my business fairly slowly. I spent probably 3 or 4 years conceptualizing it, not on paper, not formally, just in my mind, how I wanted it to feel and act and live. And then many years ago, when clients or potential clients started to ask me to handle their marketing work and their advertising work, that's when I started to sort of put pen to paper and figure it out. And that process was probably 6 to 12 months of, keeping my day job and building my business at night. And frankly, it was absolutely exhausting. And I don't know that I would have the energy to do it again. So by the time I actually launched my business and jumped off the cliff, it was successful pretty quickly because it had been a slow build. And I had been very, very thoughtful about how I wanted to do it. So I was very, very ready. I define success a little bit differently. I don't, yes, money is nice. And I, like money as much as the next person. But for me, I am absolutely in love with what I do for a living. And so I am so excited to get up and do my thing every day and work with businesses. And that's really how I define success. I absolutely understand that nothing is guaranteed, and tomorrow it could all come crashing down around me. So, the hope is that doesn't happen. But for now, I really define success as enjoying, thoroughly enjoying what I do. And hopefully it continues for many years to come.
I love that, Jennifer. For me, as Cheri mentioned, I had that anchor client that was a retainer client for a year. That allowed me the flexibility to really build my business, my brand, while I had a steady stream of income. I would say I still, when I talk with potential entrepreneurs, say that you live your life in the beginning really by 3-month increments, right? Because you have a client base and then you need to be working on the next 3 months and the next 3 months. And so for me, that year allowed me that flexibility. And then in terms of success, I think, there's always a question. I mean, I have panic attacks still going, oh my gosh, what does the pipeline look like? And then, I got to get back to it, right? And the reality is you're always at it. And so to me, success is return clients. Success is referrals from other clients. And so to me, when I think about the success measures, certainly there's the monetary piece, the flexibility piece of kind of being able to do what you want to do and how can I feel like that's success. But the other piece is connected to clients and that they're happy. And much like Jennifer said, I love what I do as well. I love working with nonprofit clients. I like helping them with their fundraising strategy. And when they have success, that ultimately is my success.
Great. I have some takeaways on this one too. So how long did it take to start up your business and realize it would be a success? Find your focus. Don't try to be all things to all people. For some, success is in 6 months. For others, it can be 5 or even 10 years. It really depends on how much you're balancing. And success is when the feedback is good, you get referrals, and you get return clients. That's great. So we have another question from the audience, if you will. This is from Bryce. And the question is, were there any specific failures or hardships you experienced when starting your business? Cheri. You're muted, Cheri.
Muted.
Number one saying, there it is.
There should be a signal for muted. We have to have a signal.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, I'll start over. There are 2 that come to mind, and I'll talk fast since I wasted 30 seconds muting myself. One was early on in my first year of business, and I had responded to a request for proposal, which I didn't do after about the first 5 years of business. All my clients come from referrals. So, but in the early years, I would respond to requests for proposals, and I was the runner-up. And it turned out that the first choice person got caught up in a scandal involving a different situation. I'm not going to go into details anyway, and had to step back from that. So the client did call, and at the same time I'd read about this in the paper, and I thought maybe I should call and see if they're open again to looking for a consultant. So, but they in the meantime had reached out to me. So it was disappointing to not be the first choice, but that is still a client today. So it's been a very good relationship, and I've worked very hard for them. And they've grown, and I've grown with them. So that's been good. The other one was a client that I'd worked with for about 5 years, and they'd had a lot of personnel changes, and they brought in a new marketing director, and that person wanted to bring in their own team. So I count that as one of the times, well, probably the only time really that I had been fired, because he did want to bring in his own agency where he had worked previously and had a good relationship with them. Understandable, but it was very disappointing and a bit of a bruise to the ego. So you have to be prepared for those things. So in one case, I benefited. In the other case, I lost a good client after a 5-year working relationship, but it was all on amicable terms. So it's the way it goes.
Was it Jamerika that said about trusting your gut? I think, as I recall that. I think I wish I had said that, because I think that is essentially so important, that you have to have a strong sense of smell. And I think you can only gain that over time. It's like experience that you have. And I had that at the beginning, I thought, but when you're in your business, it's very personal. You're talking about exchanging money in hands. And I remember a moment early on, which someone came in and I said you had to extend credit, and then you get paid when the job is done. In this particular job, my gut told me there was something off here, but I got expedient, or why I didn't listen, I didn't. And I paid a dear price. It almost put me out of business. And I was able to recover and get through. But maybe 5 or 6, 7 years later, I had another experience like that. But I was a little bit more seasoned, and I was able to work my way around it and not get all the direction I went before. And it didn't hurt me as much. I still got dinged on it, but it was something that I was able to get through. And just going around the next round where I ran into something, I smelled it was something wrong. And I just said, I'm not going to do this to myself. I can't do this with the person. I left it positive. I'm just too busy. And 6 months later, they were out of business, and they wanted me to upfront some money. So those are the things. And then back to is that if your gut says something is wrong, you really have to trust it. It's tough to walk away in the beginning, that's for sure. And I learned the hard way, but I would have been better off doing that.
One, I guess it was a failure and a hardship. I had did business with a former friend, and they didn't deliver. And so when I asked them to make edits to a project I asked them to work on, they basically disappeared and disengaged. And when I did hear from them, they came back to me with a litany of excuses. Some of them were very personal. And I said, I'm sorry you're going through this, but can you fix this? And I never heard from them again. And it was really heartbreaking, because I had actually went to WSU with this person and had been friends with them for about 10 years. But a lesson that I learned from that is to really learn to stand up for yourself, to have self-respect. Even though you may not be well-versed in everything like accounting, marketing, advertising, whatever it may be, it does not mean you are a fool, and do not allow people to disrespect you, especially if you're working in an expertise that isn't familiar to you. At the end of the day, anything that happens for your business is you, and you will be held liable. So it's really important to have good boundaries and stand up for yourself.
That's such a good point. I'll share a little bit of personal background that was my big hardship lesson learned. One of the businesses that I started, I founded, and then quickly after launch date brought a former husband on as a partner. And I can see some of you, the other panelists, laughing because you're like, oh no. And it worked okay for a couple years until it didn't. And we ended up divorced, and I sold him my half of the business, which was great for me because I got a nice payout. But I share this because as a professor that teaches entrepreneurship, I hear from so many students that they want to start a business with their best friend or their boyfriend or girlfriend or brother or sister. And I say, that's great. And it's a lot of fun until it isn't. And so really, maybe my experience can open your eyes a little bit to think about that. Just be very, very sure that the person that you're walking down this road with, even if it seems certain, is really the person that you want to be walking down this road with.
Great advice, Jennifer. Mine is more of a lesson learned, kind of connected to failure and hardship, is the ability to say no. And the reality is, if you don't say no, there's a lot of people that are going to be unhappy with the quality of your work and your attention. And so to me, the failures and hardships I have experienced have been when I have not set those clear boundaries for myself and or my clients. And I think it's okay to do that. You need to do that. And so if you can do that, you can prevent those failures and hardships. They're going to happen no matter what, but you could limit them, I would say. And so for me, it's that ability to say no, as Paul said, to walk away, as it has been said, to trust your gut. Those are the pieces that I think will limit failures and hardships, and continue to bring the success piece that we've talked about earlier.
So many great examples. Thank you all for sharing. I heard a few things on this one. Be mindful of who you partner with, trust your gut, stand up for yourself, and command respect. I like them. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and ask at least one more. We're going to see how our time is. It might be our final question. How do you market your business, and which tactics have been most successful? Cheri.
Well, I wanted to make a point on this, on the importance of giving back. And I market my business through referrals from having worked with people through, one, professional associations, two, clients that we've shared or had some sort of partnership on, and doing good work. It's just that simple. I've gotten some very good pieces of business from reporters who know me and know I can deliver on time and meet deadlines and produce written materials that they can use and all that. So those are probably the three ways. I've been, as mentioned in the bio, involved with 3 professional associations. Giving back to Murrow has been, I've never approached it as a way to generate business, but it's been a great way to meet colleagues around the country. I know Paul has been a past chair of the Murrow Professional Advisory Board. I'm currently on the board. So networks, whatever form they take, I'm in a group of independent public relations women, and we support each other, whether it's if someone's facing a health crisis or has a difficult client that they want to hand off. I have fired a client and offered it to others that might have a better chemistry, if you will. So early on, I did a little bit of advertising in professional directories, and I do attribute one client to a cold call off a directory listing. So, but I'm not doing any of that now because I have a full plate for the most part. I love doing little projects, and as they come along, I can fit those in usually.
Yeah, I would just say, I've got to say what Cheri said, is that professional associations, I think those have really helped along the way. I think the best is word of mouth, that what you're doing, if you get that out there and somebody's out there, they've had an experience with you, they've had a good relationship, that really helps. The other thing that I've done over the years is I bought, and I'm still doing it actually, I host a radio show, and it's called Voices of Experience, and I buy my own time, and I'm on these stations that allow you to do that, and I'm able to bring people on board and talk to them if they're a business owner who happens to be a client of mine. Before, I don't do that so much anymore, but I used to do that, and I found that was a really good way to get known and also to have a good experience one-on-one with somebody, and also tee them up and do something for them and not really expecting anything in return per se. And often it doesn't turn into something, but occasionally it does. So those three elements I felt have been the best way I've been approaching it. And of course, then there's your website and trying to drive people to that. That's worked. Not great, but it has worked.
I would say with doing motivational speaking, it really is one gig at a time. And people have seen me in the audience and have brought me to speak. I've had people pass my name along. Obviously, I have like my website and social media, which allows me to engage with people and get to know them. And I have a blog that I publish monthly as well on my website, which just allows people to see who I am. And with social media, I want to point out, it's a great tool if you are actively engaging with people. You know, I do share, you know, the cute, successful stories of foster kids, but I also talk about some of the hard stuff. Seattle Times came out with an article about, is the state removing too many kids from their homes? And I share that article and it brought on dialogue. And so with someone like me, it's important that I'm seen as an expert, but I also have to demonstrate that by sharing everything.
So marketing for me, ironically, I have to be a little bit careful because I'm a very small agency. I don't have a huge client roster by design. I'm fairly selective. And I want to make sure that the projects that I take on, I'm able to really focus on and give my full attention and do a good job. So the way that I market my business is primarily word of mouth. However, I've learned with that, when I have a good relationship with a client and we've had some success, I have to let them know that I, do have any referrals that maybe you could send my way, or if you hear of somebody looking for my skills, I'm open to you passing my name along. I have to connect those dots to let them know that I'm, shopping for new work. I also, like some of the other panelists have mentioned, I do a fair bit in my region to give back. And so that keeps my name front and center and kind of builds that top of mind awareness. I also collaborate with several colleagues, and we share ideas and projects and swap back and forth. This isn't a fit for me, maybe it's a fit for you. So it's pretty sustainable that way. I do occasionally respond to an RFP or an RFQ when I see a project that I think looks interesting and might fit and would fit in nicely with my pipeline. But I don't do a lot of paid advertising for my business because I don't know that I could service that. So if, there was a significant response, I'd be in trouble actually. So I have to be very careful with it.
And really quick, I would just add, you are your brand. So it doesn't matter if you're by yourself or you're part of a company, you are your brand. So, I use website, I use social media, but mostly word of mouth and past clients, in addition to giving back. So presenting workshops, conferences where my clients will be. And then, in the beginning, it's really hard to figure this balance out, but giving my time away, right? And spending time with clients, helping people, because I always believe that those conversations that you think are just conversations will eventually turn into a client. And it might not be that person that you're talking with right away, but if that person talked to someone and then they call you, then that client, that marketing led to business. So that's what I would add.
Thank you so much. We are at the top of the hour. So many great questions and a terrific contribution by the panelists. Have a wonderful evening, and always go Cougs.
Go Cougs. Great job, you guys. That was fun.
That's fun.
Thank you.
Well, enjoy your time in Hawaii.
Oh, thanks.